Today we're playing Up the Beanstalk in Historic. We might not have access to degenerate Evoke Elementals like in Modern, but there are other interesting ways of taking advantage of this card. Thought Monitor, Mirror Enforcer and Reality Heist all trigger Up the Beanstalk, but in reality they're free or almost free to cast thanks to the Affinity mechanic. Traditionally, this archetype is about dumping your hand on the battlefield as early as possible for a fast win, but going all in on that game plan can be rather vulnerable to interaction, since you'll often be left in top deck mode afterwards. Up the Beanstalk is a great solution to this problem, since we get to keep the explosive core of the deck while mitigating some of that vulnerability to interaction. Ornithopter and Retrofitter Foundry lets us open the game with a 4/4 golem, and just like Up the Beanstalk, Retrofitter Foundry also helps in attrition-based matchups. Patchwork Automaton is a great payoff for playing a lot of artifacts, and it can get really big really fast. The same's true for Nettle Cyst, that's not only a massive beater by itself, but can also be moved onto our flying creatures to avoid chump blocking. Volt Scourge probably the best of the bunch, and it's our most reliable way of gaining life in matchups where that matters. Tough Cookie puts 2 artifacts on the battlefield, and its activated ability is excellent with our indestructible artifact lands. These are also absolutely essential Affinity enablers. We also want room for a single Inventors Fair in our mana base, and since we're only playing a total of 19 lands, we're backing it up with a pair of Springleaf Drum to get the amount of colored mana sources in the right spot. This card's also often going to be part of our most explosive openings. Metallic Rebuke is our only real piece of interaction, but it's a solid one, and Historic is a format where certain things simply have to be answered. Here's an overview of the full deck list, which you'll of course also be able to find it down in the description. Now let's see the deck in action. So this hand looks just fine. It's not the most explosive, but we can get a decent affinity count pretty quickly, and we got plenty of gas, so let's keep it. Play Darksteel Citadel and pass the turn. Opponent opens with an untapped Shockland followed by a Soulscar Mage, so it's probably Wizards. We draw a Nettle Cyst, and we play the Spire of Industry and run out the Tough Cookie. Opponent plays an Otawara and burns the cookie, the play with fire. Soulscar Mage attacks and we get the turn. We draw a Patchwork Automaton, which is exactly why we've been holding on to the Ornithopter, so we play both of them and grow the Patchwork Automaton, and then we pass. Opponent plays an Expressive Iteration. They find a basic mountain, and then drops a second Soulscar Mage and then passes. We draw a Volt Scourge. So since we're up against the Wizards, the game plan now becomes suiting it up with this Nettle Cyst that's in our hand. However, we're looking pretty stable for now. We play Up the Beanstalk to see if we can find our third land, but without any luck. It's a Springleaf Drum and we have to pass the turn. Opponent spends 3 mana to deal with the Automaton with a Reckless Rage. They get some prowess triggers and beats us for 4. We're not gonna block since we have multiple affinity cards sitting in our hand, so we want this Ornithopter alive. We finally find that third land, so now things start to get interesting. We play the Springleaf Drum, and then we pay the Phyrexian mana cost for Volt Scourge. Now we can cast Thought Monitor for 1 mana, and we pay the blue with Springleaf Drum rather than the Spire, just to keep our life total as high as possible. That triggers Up the Beanstalk and we find a Mirror Enforcer. We now get to play Mirror Enforcer for 0 to trigger Up the Beanstalk again. Then we pass. Opponent throws a Static Discharge at our face and we use Metallic Rebuke to counter it. Opponent moves to combat and turns both Soulscar Mages sideways. We go for the block since a Wizard's Lightning would be lethal in combination with the double prowess triggers in this situation. And it turns out they did have it, but now they have to point it at the Mirror Enforcer. We go down to 6 and we get the turn. We draw a Patchwork Automaton. We have a couple of options here. We could just run out the Nettle Cyst, but we don't have enough mana to move it onto the Volt Scourge this turn. And we don't want to telegraph our game plan and give them a window to destroy the Volt Scourge. So we play the Patchwork Automaton, hold up enough mana to either activate the food token or cast Reality Heist and then pass. Opponent throws even more burn at our face, and we activate the food with the spell on the stack to avoid getting burned in response to the activation later. Then they throw even more burn at our face, and we're down to just 3 life. That means we have to double chump block the Soulscar Mage to stay alive. After combat, they pass the turn. We draw an Up the Beanstalk. There is only one thing to do here, so we play out the Nettle Cyst and move it under the Volt Scourge so we can start stabilizing. We swing in for 9 damage and go up to 12 life and then pass the turn. Opponent plays a Sleight of Hand. Then they play a tapped land and get rid of our only blocker with yet another burn spell. And with their last open mana, they cast a Reckless Charge and end up being 1 single point of damage away from lethal. And now we got lethal on the backswing, just barely squeezing out a victory. The original plan was to include significantly more gameplay as well as an analysis of the deck where we discuss things like strengths and weaknesses, how it lines up in the current historic metagame, how to approach solving the deck's problems, and just the overall performance of the deck. However, I honestly spent way too many hours experimenting and editing this video, so I actually decided to just end it here and move on to the next project. So for now, this is to be considered an appetizer for future content here on the channel, and I'm really curious, like, what do you actually think of this style of highly edited Magic Arena gameplay video? Is it a little over the top, or did you actually think it was pretty cool? Please let me know in the comments and I'll try to make improvements for the next video. I hope you enjoyed this quick watch and I'll see you in the next one.